Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. When I grew up in Minnesota, we used to have a joke that Minnesota has two seasons. We have a season called Shovel and a season called Swat. Shovel obviously being winter, Swat being summer, and sort of commenting on the fact that Minnesota generally did not have long springs or autumns that we would shift dramatically from one to the other. And I have to say, while I find that Illinois does tend to have a nice autumn and usually a decent spring, this year it was Minnesota style quick from winter to summer, insofar as for most of April we were having days when it was chilly enough that I did not want to leave the house without a jacket, and sometimes I wanted to have gloves and a hat. And now in May, it's like May 9th here, it's hot enough that I would be uncomfortable if I weren't wearing a t-shirt. And on Thursday, I'm going to have to bring a change of clothes for my walk to school because it's going to be so warm. Any clothes I walk to school in will be too sweaty to teach in. So we're going to shift from needs a hat to needs a change of clothes because it's too hot in less than a month. Welcome to the Midwest. So that gives you an idea. Now, it's not actually that hot today. It's very comfortable. I would say mid to high 70s today. The sun is out, but it's not brutal in terms of heat. It's going to be a pleasant walk home, although very windy. Hopefully the wind guard on my microphone is working adequately, because if it's not, this whole recording is going to be scrapped. And actually, last week it was super rainy, so I was carrying an umbrella all week walking home, which means that I didn't really record episodes last week either. So I'm getting a little behind, and I'm sure you're missing me. You're missing me. Well, given that it's been a little while, it's time for another update in what I've been playing. That's right, it's Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot. For those of you who are new to the podcast, Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot is a mini review segment that I do every third or fourth episode, roughly, in which I talk about 3 games that I've played for the first time recently. I usually do 3 because none of these games have I played in deep enough, in enough depth to do a proper review. So I only have, 5 minutes of stuff to say about them. And so if I do 3 of them in a episode, that meets the time that I have to walk and gives you a little taste of what they are, a little taste of what I think of them, and you can pursue the games or not based on that, or you can, urge me to play them a bunch more times and do a message from the deep episode or a dual episode later. All of those are possible. But for the time being, it's 3 games, 3 short observation sessions. So the 3 games I'm going to talk about today are Jetpack Joyride, Survive Escape from Atlantis, and Barrage. So start with Jetpack Joyride. I had an opportunity to play this. I borrowed it from some friends, and so I did not buy it myself, although it was a cute little game based on the phone app of the same name. And the board game was created by Lucky Duck, which that company had started out. Part of their early strategy was to make games based on popular phone apps because there's a lot of name recognition in there. So in Jetpack Joyride, you are doing a sort of board game version of what you're doing in the phone app. Namely, you've got a jetpack and you're flying through a dangerous science lab trying to escape. So the way the game plays is that you have a series of cards laid out that give you the map of the lab that you're flying through. And then in the middle of the table, you have a whole bunch of translucent yellow tiles in polyomino shapes of various sizes and shapes. And the game is played Galaxy Trucker style. In other words, when we say go, each person is allowed to use one hand to take tiles from the stack in the middle of the table and put them on their lab mat so that they're to sort of describe the route that their jetpack joyrider is taking through the lab. Now basically the rule is that the tile you place has to be orthogonally adjacent to the last square of the previous tile that you placed. And basically what you're doing is you're mapping a route through the lab. There are a variety of obstacles that you're trying to pass. There are a whole bunch of coins that you're trying to collect that will get points. And then each game you have a number of goals that you're trying to meet. Things like on one of the cards end your route lower than you started, or consistently moving equal or down, that sort of thing. There's another one where you're supposed to give high fives to the scientists, meaning that you pass through the space one above them. And there's a number of other things. So you have these goals, and then, like I said, the game also in Galaxy Trucker style is played as a kind of race. So you start putting down the tiles at the same time as the other players, and you're hurrying to build the best or fastest path through the lab that you can. The idea being the person who gets to the end first, they call time, and everyone else has to stop adding things. And thus the other people are going to get fewer points, not because they didn't finish, but just because if you didn't get all the way through, you had less opportunity to earn points from coins and your objectives. Finishing itself doesn't get you any points. This is a fun little speed game. It's not quite a dexterity game. It's, it really feels a lot like less complicated Galaxy Trucker. So if you've played Galaxy Trucker, you have that in mind. This game feels like that, only lighter. It's like a filler version of Galaxy Trucker. My son and I enjoyed it quite a bit. He actually asked me to hold on to it for a little while longer so we could play it a couple more times before I returned it to the friends I borrowed it from. So that's an interesting sign. There are a variety of cards and special powers that you can get. These different equipment cards that you get that change your abilities as you're flying through, give you rule breakers. I mean, it's a fine game. I probably wouldn't spend much money to buy it myself, but especially if you have a younger person who enjoys Jetpack Joyride or even just wants a kind of quick, simple game, this is a great one to try out. That's Jetpack Joyride from Lucky Duck Games. Check the show notes for a link to the Board Game Geek page if you want to see the designer's name. I don't have it off the top of my head. The second game I'm going to talk about today is a classic. This is a pretty old game. It has been around for a long time, sort of famously, or I guess depending how closely you follow the trials and tribulations of the podfather himself, Stephen Buonocore. The game Survive Escape from Atlantis was one of the first successful games that Stronghold Games published. They took a classic design, revived it a little bit, gave it some new art and a little bit of polish, and it became a consistent good seller for them. This is a hidden, it's not hidden movement because, all right, so the way it works is that you have a board in the middle of you have a set of tiles in the middle of the board that count as Atlantis. And you have a bunch of little people that are your workers, and your goal is to get your workers onto these islands on the side of the board without having them get eaten by the various menaces that are floating around in the water. On your turn, you get to move two of your people, and then you draw a card, and the card lets you manipulate one piece of the nasty stuff on the board. And like I said, your goal is to get your people to the safety islands and before Atlantis sinks, because each round Atlantis is sinking further into the water, and when it sinks all the way in, that ends the game, or when nobody else can go. Now this is sort of famously a very cutthroat game. On your turn, if you think about it as like a video game, each person is trying to get their characters out to the safety of the islands, and then the autonomous part of the game has these deadly things that are trying to kill you. And there's a significant amount of luck about whether the thing comes up that gets you when you're vulnerable to a particular danger. But since it's a board game, there is no computer to do that. So instead, the way the game works is that you, as the players, are the ones moving the menacing things around. The upside of this is that the menacing things are far more cunning than any AI could be, or at least they're thoughtful. The downside, of course, is that in order to play well, you have to attack each other's pieces. Now, when it's your turn to move the shark and you go and eat somebody's guy, on one hand, it feels bad to be like, oh, I ate your guy with the shark. On the other hand, doing so is necessary for the playing of the game. And so you don't want to hold a grudge with anybody if they eat your guy, but it still feels like, hey, you did that to me, because they did. So this is definitely a game where you rise or fall, or you make it or don't, based on the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations of how mean the other players are willing to be to you, and the significant amount of luck. Did they draw the thing they needed to really mess with you at the right time? I thought it was fine. I did win, so that makes it an amazing game. No, I thought it was fine. The intense cutthroat nature of the design really does not suit my temperament, as I'm sure you know by now. And so that means that Survive is not going to be a game I'm going to put on the table out of a desire to play it very often, because it's just so cutthroat. That said, it was a good time. It was fun to eat each other's guys with sharks and octopuses and whatnot, or sharks and whales. I think it's whales. So that's Survive, Escape from Atlantis. All right, the last game that I want to talk about today is Barrage. Barrage is a French game designed by two people, one of whom is Simone Luciani. I forget who the other one is. I'm sorry about that. And I think published by Cranio Creations, if I'm correct. In this game, you play Hydra engineers building a series of dams in a contested mountainous area where, for some reason, up to five different countries can vie for economic value there. I don't really understand the country theming. I don't know why you couldn't just be companies, but whatever, that's the theme. So this game is a crunchy, heavy Euro, sort of in the spirit of Brass, with complicated, really interesting economic decisions to make. The primary turn mechanism in Brass, remember, it's playing cards. You have to have cards that match the thing you want to do. In Barrage, it's these action spaces that you get to put on this rondel. And so the way it works is there's this wheel, and whenever you take an action, you put the action tile for that action on the wheel. And then at the end of your turn, you turn the wheel one time. And the wheel has 6 spaces. So if you only do that one at a time, you're going to have to turn the wheel 5 times. And you only turn the wheel when you use one of these tiles. Sometimes you're not using a tile, you're putting your workers on the shared worker spaces, which don't use one of the tiles at all. You have a bunch of workers, I think 8. And on your turn, you're going to use some number of them. Sometimes it's just 1, sometimes it's up to 3. I don't know if there's any spaces that use 4, but so you're going to use your workers in a variety of different ways to accomplish all sorts of different things, from gathering resources to building the dams to building these towers that they call converters, I think they're called, and then to build power plants. So you need all 3 things sort of working in concert to make your money. So the game, it's called Barrage because that's French for dam, I guess. And the idea is that you are working to make money and earn points by generating this electricity with your dams and your power plants. The clever and or tricky part of the game is that there are a limited number of spots where you can build dams, and other people can build dams above where you built your dam. So this is definitely a game where somebody can kind of can drink your milkshake, as they would say in Gangs of New York. And honestly, that's the reason I've held off playing this game. That when this game came out, there were 2 things that were sort of really strong in the review sphere about this game. 1, it's really good. 2, extremely cutthroat. That was kind of the story of Barrage that I had heard. So a friend of mine, Eric, who really likes a lot of the same heavy games I do, he's like, you got to play Barrage. It's great, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, well, if you say it's great and you want to bring it, I'll give it a try. But the cutthroat element of it really does seem one notch probably too far for me. Because it was so cutthroat and I had heard that, I did do one bit of preparation that I wouldn't normally do for most games, which is I watched one basic strategy advice video. So I normally don't do that. I normally just explore. But somewhere in one of the learn to play videos that I watched, I saw a thing that said basically you really need to make sure you understand all the rules and how everything works together, because Barrage is one of those games where a blunder in your first turn can basically destroy your whole game. You're out of the running, and it won't be fun. And I don't want to play a game where I make that kind of blunder, and that is the kind of thing I'll do. So I watched a video that was like 20 minutes. It was basic advice about how to play Barrage, things to watch for. And that helped me do pretty well. I got second in the game, in part because I knew the kind of pitfalls that you could hit if you weren't thinking carefully about how your resources play together and how different pieces work. That said, I also did well because I leaned into the thing the game encouraged, which was this cutthroat, I drink your milkshake kind of approach. And frankly, I didn't enjoy doing that. When I could see other people having a worse game because I had made this move that took their thing that they were working on, that did not feel good. At the same time, that's the way this game was built. Had I not done that, then they would get more benefit than they deserve to because they made a suboptimal move by leaving this open. And I would do worse because I would be going to a worse spot because I'm leaving open this spot that they left open because they made a suboptimal move. So it was very frustrating from that perspective to really know that, okay, I got to just play mean. That's the way the game works. At the same time, I really liked the intricacy of the economics. I really liked the way that the worker placement spaces go. I really like the movement of the game. And I think, if a friend later asks me to play Barrage again, I'll say, sure. I'm probably not going to ask to bring it out myself, but it was a really compelling and interesting experience, and I really enjoyed playing it. So if you get a chance and you could stomach the really vital, vicious, backstabbing kind of play, Barrage might be a game for you. Check it out if you get a chance. So what have you been playing lately, dear listener? I'd love to hear. Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your experiences, your thoughts, your recent plays. Tell me what you think of Jetpack Joyride or Survive Escape from Atlantis or Barrage, or tell me what you've been playing new. I'd love to hear about all of it. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.